Family relationship parenting and sibling strategies. Now, family relationships are the connection and bonds we have with our family members. It includes our relationship with parents, siblings, grandparents, and other relatives. Now, family relationships are very important because they provide love, support, and a sense of belonging. Now, the question is, how can we balance our grandparents, parents, children, siblings, and other family members without anyone feeling left out and unimportant? Welcome to Insight Today. I am Jumai Manson. I'm being joined by Mrs. Mariam Abdul. She is a lawyer, a women and children's rights advocate. She specializes in conflict mitigation. Don't go anywhere. The program continues shortly. Stay tuned. You're welcome back to the program Insight Today. We are looking at family relationships and, of course, sibling strategies on how to balance the family front and how to make everything, bringing it into a balance for no lapses and, of course, no controversies and no issues when it comes to family relationships. And like I said, I am being joined by Mrs. Mariam Abdul. She is a lawyer, a women and children's rights advocate, and she specializes in conflict mitigation, where she comes in when it comes to this particular matter at hand, family relationships. And good afternoon, Mariam.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Mrs. Mariam Abdul. Thank you for joining me on the program Insight Today. I'm very grateful to have you on the program.
I'm so happy for being here. Thank you.
Now, today we're going to be looking at family relationships, that's parenting and, of course, sibling strategies, or how to, mitigate each and every one of these individuals together. Now, in your own well of knowledge, how do you describe a good and healthy family relationship? What does it really entail?
First of all, it entails selflessness. In order to give of yourself, you have to be selfless. You have to have compassion. You have to be sensitive to families' needs. So, for instance, if you have siblings that are not feeling well or have special needs, family members, or people that need you to look after them, you have to have a large heart in order to show or shower your kindness on them. So, if you're not a selfless person, or somebody who cares about other people, it's going to be difficult for you to have a good family dynamic with your relatives.
All right, Mrs. Mariam, I want to ask a question. In this particular world where we are, when it comes to the African world, I would say, it's pretty hard because everyone is on the go. Everyone thinks about his or herself. That quality time when it has to do with family, it's not there. People are too, they concentrate more on the hustle and the bustle, if I might use that. Now, how can families spend that quality time together, creating that bond without one or more of the family members seeing it as a burden? Like, I would want to spend quality time with family members, but other family members will think, oh, I'm being stressed or I have to. How can you actually combine all of that?
Well, there's a term people use loosely called multitasking. And for me, I find multitasking to be something that shouldn't be used anyhow. Because if you don't have the ability to multitask, then definitely you cannot navigate through, as you say, the hustle and bustle of life. And then at the same time, if you do not love family members, it's going to be difficult for you to multitask. So if you're somebody who works a 9-to-5 job, when you come home, definitely you have to keep your own needs, your own relaxation to some extent to one side and cater for the needs of your immediate family members. It can be even at that time your extended family members want to visit you. You know, I want to see what you're up to and touch base, or even need funds or something. And then you're harsh because you've worked 9 to 5. You know, you have to look deep within you and show kindness and find a way to take care of your own mental state or your own mental needs. Definitely. But then I feel you have to put other people before you in that regard. I think when you retire at night, you rest, isn't it? So we have to think about, you know, certain things like that. And I still go back to my first message, which is selflessness. Selflessness.
You know, talking about selflessness, Mariam, most individuals, they do not understand what parenting entails. They do not know what it really, what it means to parent children. Most people leave that lapses. Some mothers, some fathers feel it is the duty of the mother and the mother alone to ensure that the child is well dressed, the child has eaten, the child is, you know, complying with the societal issues when it comes to behavioral pattern and all of that. How do you describe parenting skills in Africa? Can you create a balance when it comes to let's compare it a bit with the Western world? Do you think ours is too rigid or it's a bit flexible? How do you see it and how can you compare it? All right, I guess Mrs. Mariam Abdul, there's a little bit of network issue there, but I'm sure she's going to be back. Ms. Mariam, are you here? So questions like I am asking when it comes to the dynamics, when it comes to parenting styles, parenting skills, without affecting, you know, back in the day, we had parents who would tell you it is being done this way, it is being done that way. And of course, Mrs. Mariam Abdul is back. Ms. Mariam, are you here?
Yes, so sorry about that. I think there was a glitch.
Okay. Now, like I said, how can we compare our form, the way our parenting styles when it comes to being African and the Western world? Of course, you know how it is. There's so much flexibility when it comes to understanding that child, allowing the child to express his or herself. But, you know, the kind of family relations we have here in Africa, it's what I say goes. We do not give that laxity for children to express themselves. How can you, let's talk about parenting skills and parenting style. Do you think we have gotten it right or we still have a long way and a lot of work to do?
You know, you can't brush a picture with one stroke. The general way we look at African parents is you beat and you beat and you beat and you pound and you pound and you pound. And like you said, what I say goes. That's how we perceive African parenting. And of course, to some extent, it was like that for the most part. But things have changed. I believe they've progressed in a way that maybe something that we don't like. That authoritarian thing that once existed has kind of diminished a bit. But what I find is talking to children, not kids now, from the ages of maybe like 10 years old and above, speaking to them and letting them understand what you're saying, I think is a very, very good parenting style. Because once you nurture them with a little bit of spanking from 2 years old to 9, you've taught them the basics of authority and understanding and things like that. But from 10 and upwards, I think from my own kind of parenting skill and from what I've studied, I think it works better to avoid them calling the police for you like in foreign countries.
Exactly. But looking at it, Mariam, critically, you know, our grandparents, the way they're up, the way they brought our parents up, and the way we bring up our children different. So how can we balance all of these things without offending anyone? There's this example that I have. There was a woman who gave birth, and her grandma and her mother came to the house to visit. And you know the way we bathe our children, and the mother wanted the grandmom to come to the house so that her daughter could experience that the way what she experienced when she gave birth. But when the grandmother started bathing the child, the girl started shouting, "No, no, 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 you shouldn't do that." And all the mother wanted was to create that bond. Now, do you think our generations, they do not understand what that family relationship is? Sometimes you have to keep a blind eye or bear it or keep quiet for just to allow peace to reign when it comes to issues like this. Do you think this generation, they do not understand what family relationship entails? Everyone is too busy. They feel theirs, in quote, is right and right all the time.
So we have to look at the best interest of the child. In your scenario, if it harms the child, the best interest of the child is what we should put forth. You know, this omugo of bending the child's hand and doing all these weird things to the child are dangerous. They're risky. And if you know something, you know the risks. When you don't know something, I don't know, I think God just protects you. But the time of ignorance and the time of not knowing things, I think it has gone. And whatever is in the best interest of the child, I feel, is what we should follow. But then when doing things, you have to be kind and respectful. You can't yell at your grandmother, you can't yell at your father or your mother because you feel that something they're doing to your child is not proper. You know, that's an approach that I really don't take too kindly to. So I think the best interest of the child is the way forward.
Now, in a situation whereby the new parents, individual from the family front, actually tells the parents, that's the mom and the dad, tells the son or the daughter what to do, even when they are in that family circle, they have their own children. Now, how do you go about this? How do you go about all of these respecting the father, the mother, without anyone being left out and feel, oh, because she now has her own home, she doesn't take instructions anymore? Because that's part of the relationship in which we have. We obey, respect our parents. Now, how can we do that, respecting and not feeling as if, oh, you're doing this wrongly, without anyone feeling left out?
Diplomacy. You have to be diplomatic with your parents, with your relatives, whether siblings, extended family. You have to be diplomatic. You have to be courteous and respectful. They don't know all the answers. And of course, they will always tell you, but I did this to you when you were a child and nothing happened to you. That's their
Some
go-to
parents feel
response.
they do know.
Why won't you let me give you this water that is from the tap? Exactly. So now in the future, the country has changed. For instance, you can't drink water from the tap. You cannot travel the streets, you know, the highways anymore because there's kidnapping. Many things that they did in the 80s, 70s, 60s have been taken over by events. So being courteous, being respectful, and being diplomatic to your relatives, saying, oh, but in the 90s, it wasn't like this. We can't give Cerelac this way now because of this, you know, just be very, very kind. What we find now is kids or children are very disrespectful to their, you know, family members because they try to prove a point of, I'm more educated. Meanwhile, their parents send them to school. So the parents will look at you like, is it not me that sent you to school? You know, that kind of, is it not me that cleaned you when you were a child? You know, so you have to really, really be kind and respectful and be diplomatic.
Now, let's talk about your area of concentration that has to do with conflict mitigation. Now, how do you navigate conflict resolution among parents without affecting the mental health of children?
So in what sense are you speaking about in terms of
maybe a case of argument? You know, most parents, when there's an argument, without affecting that mental health and the relationship in which they've built along the years, how do you navigate around that?
Yeah, you just have to be extremely careful around children because
how
they're
can you be careful when
impressionable.
you're yelling?
Yes, because they're impressionable people, they internalize everything that they watch and they replicate it. Replicate it through drama and play and fun as children, and then they replicate it dangerously in the future because they've internalized it. So whenever there's conflict in the house, it's difficult. It's easier said than done. But couples should try their best to speak in a courteous way to one another. And then, of course, if they're upset, they can let off steam by leaving the room or finding some activity to do. Because when they come back together, it confuses the children. One mommy and daddy just yelling obscene words to themselves, and now all of a sudden they're hugging each other again. So it confuses the child. So you have to navigate it carefully. They're not at home forever. They're at home for like 18 or 19 years maximum before they leave. And, so parents should really try their best to inculcate and pass on peace and kindness, to their children, even in conflict situations.
But Mariam, if you look at it critically, sometimes it's really hard. I've watched episodes of individuals who actually say some very mean things to their second half, their best half, and the kids just sit down and they watch, forgetting the fact that children, they pick up these lines and they learn from every action, causing a breach in that family relationship. I have seen that some kids have come up to say with all of these, they never want to be in a relationship or marry because of what they face. Now, parents who indulge in such, what can we actually say to them when, forgetting the fact that they have children and they just go all out when it comes to being very violent with their better half, not forgetting that there is a family relationship they need to protect, be it with themselves or the children. What can you actually say about that?
So at the barest minimum, there should be some kind of counseling for couples. Churches give counseling, mosques give counseling, and then, of course, there's psychological or psychosocial trauma counseling that couples can get. If you're looking for pro bono counseling, organizations such as mine give pro bono counseling, to couples and other kinds of people with little trauma or in the need of counseling. So these agencies or these structures, they actually give counseling. And then when you mention violence and things like that, so it really, you navigate through the different kinds of forms of conflict. So if you have something like domestic violence, definitely the police has to be involved. Some areas you need social services. So it really depends on the kind of conflict within houses. But the key thing to note is that the children need a lot of support in these situations. So they definitely need somebody with experience in child psychology for the child to break out of that situation. So it really depends on the situation that we find ourselves in.
Now let's talk about conflict among siblings. How do you handle that in order to still maintain that family relationship? How do you handle the conflict that siblings bring, the baggage they bring along when it comes to conflict in the home front?
Siblings are very, very amazing. You can keep malice with a sibling for 20 years, and once you make peace, you feel as if you never ever stop talking to a sibling. Conflict with siblings is very difficult to navigate, because if you are the mother and there's a conflict between your children, for instance, whose side are you on? And if you make a mistake and take one side over the other, you end up hurting the other child, and one thinks you love one over the other, no matter how many times they've had that conflict. That's one aspect. If you're a spouse and your husband or wife's siblings are quarreling and you want to navigate, it's very, very dicey. One has to be extremely careful with sibling conflict. It's a very, very, if you look at studies of sibling rivalry, it's very deep-seated. And you hear during, psychosocial trauma counseling, they date it back to their parents. They feel the need to say that their parents did X, Y, Z to them. And that's why maybe, for instance, when they get married, they have some kind of dynamic, and then they carry it on to their children, and it goes on and on and on and like that. So theirs is quite technical, and it's very It's very difficult to navigate through, but it's doable.
Now, how do you encourage open communication? You know, like I mentioned before, in Africa where we're from, once you have that courage to open up and express yourself as a child, we see it as being disrespectful. So how can you maintain a balance and balance the relationship in the family front when it has to do with open communication? Now, this is to the children now and also the parents. How do you do that to balance it?
If you recall, I mentioned talking to children within a certain age. I specifically said from like 10 years old to, above. Why you have to have that open-ended dialogue style is so that it's easier for you or easier for the child and you to dialogue on issues. So you stop your spanking and your yelling, pulling ears and pulling noses from like 2 years old to 10. And then you start dialogue, actual open talk with the child from 10 and above, so that place is created, that space is created for you and your child to open up. But like you've mentioned, in Nigeria, when a child is dialoguing or talking to the mother or father about something or other elder family members, they say that child is rude or disrespectful. But then hopefully you have already taught the child not to talk back, not to be disrespectful or to be rude. So hopefully if you've done your work, your homework from the beginning, that opportunity is open. But then again, there's an area where a child cannot open up to a parent, and then you have to get external assistance. There are many cases like that. I've had 1 or 2 cases like that where a client came to me and mentioned that her child was born out of wedlock about 25 years ago, and the child has resented his mother all these years and does not know how to express himself to his mother. And so I was there, and the mother was there, and the son was there, and then we discussed his basic hatred for his mother, because he had no father, so he feels as if he had no father figure because of his mom. So he internalized that hatred, and he was just a very unruly child. So I had to come in and explain to the boy or the man now, that his mother did his best for him, and the relationship is going on well. If at some point in the relationship she was able to explain these things, maybe when he was a teenager, I think things would have been better. So I really encourage parents to try this open dialogue style parenting, and then teach them so that you don't create the space of them being rude to you.
Now, Mariam, what is the implication for family relations for individuals that do not have that connection or bond with family members? What's the negative aspect of it? Everyone just does what they want. No one cares about each other. Is there any negative implication when it comes to that? Everyone being independent?
Of course, that's where you have all the horrible people in society who steal and lie and are corrupt in government. That's where you have all the people who don't have a conscience. They are created from these homes that you mentioned. And parents like to throw their hands up in the air and leave all responsibility to schools or to friends or to relatives, pointing fingers at that school didn't do XYZ thing and that friend didn't do XYZ thing. Whereas it's you.
But Mariam, if you look at this, school has a major role to play, because half of the time the kids are in their school. So if parents actually point that finger to the school, I think the school owes it to give explanations, because half of the time they're in school from 7 till some 3 p.m. So if a parent comes out and says the school is not paying attention to their child, don't you think the parent is right?
I beg to differ. The school's responsibility is to ensure discipline within the school. Every institution has its rules. And the children's rules in school are clearly defined. Do not talk in class. Do your homework. Keep your class neat. Keep your uniform clean. Do not talk back to your teachers. Things that have to do with school rules. It's not their responsibility to teach you what your parents should have taught you at home. If your parents do not discipline you at home, how on earth do you expect the school to discipline you? It can't work, because you've already taught them in discipline. And then you now throw the responsibility on somebody that didn't bring them into this world. And it really infuriates me when parents do that. And then they give this time factor you gave. My child is in school from 8 to 3, and therefore,
But that's the
it's the
truth,
school's fault
Mariam.
that the child
But
is
that's the
unruly.
truth. But the fact that the parent
No,
has their own
I
role to play, the
disagree.
school should play that
I disagree.
that role is very important. They should be able to give account. That's why they're being paid,
Yeah.
don't you think? But the fact that they're going to instill
They're actually
knowledge,
being paid to
discipline
teach.
is very important. So when
And to give
when the school comes out and says is the responsibility of the parent, yes, but the school owes more. Well, anyway, Mariam, let's quickly go on a very quick break. We will be back. I know at this point we're not going to agree, but we will disagree to agree. Right, Mariam?
Sure.
All right. So let's quickly go on a quick break. Insight Today continues shortly. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. You're welcome back. And if you're just tuning in, this is Insight Today on Global Television. And we're looking at family relationships, parenting, and sibling dynamics. And we know that it's all about the connection and interactions within a family. Now, it includes how parents raise their children, how siblings, and the overall dynamics within the family unit. It's fascinating to see how these relationships shape our lives and influences our deep thinking and everything that concerns us. Now, what if all of these factors are not in place when it comes to family bonding together, family spending time together, conflict resolution when it comes to not taking sides, where it has to be with the parents, the sibling rivalry, and of course, dynamics and all of these things amongst others. Now, looking at this particular issue critically, I am being joined by Mariam Abdul. She is a legal practitioner, and of course, she is correction. When it comes to mitigation, she is top notch in that aspect. Now, she's throwing more insight when it comes to how families should go about when it comes to conflict. That's why she's a conflict mitigation specialist. And of course, bringing families together without upsetting anyone, creating that balance of a good and healthy family relationship, what it entails. And of course, family spending quality time together. Most families do not spend quality time together because of the, in quotes, quote and unquote, hustle and bustle that happens within our society. Not now relating it to the high cost of living, most parents leave their children in the hands of helps. Most parents leave their children in the hands of their teacher, giving proportioning blames to schools, and of course some that attend services, Islamias. People just give that blame and say it is their right. But what happens to you as a parent? How do you create that balance in the home front, bringing your families and every other person together in that particular unit? It is very important. Now, for parents who lack this ability to create that bond among family members, especially their children, how do you think the child is going to grow up in the future? The child might not have that relationship that has to do with confiding in you. I know someone once said, if you do not listen to your child when he's saying rubbish or when he's not making sense, the day he makes sense, you might not be available to listen to that child because he will give his attention to his peers who might, if he's unlucky, might mislead or misguide him. So it's very important we create that bond by coming together, bringing everyone along without hurting anyone's feeling or leaving anyone left out. Now, what are the common challenges when it comes to sibling conflict? There are so many. Some parents take sides. Well, it's better you bring families together, bring siblings together for them to understand. And Mariam Abdul said something that siblings can keep malice for 20 years, but when they come together, they make it count, and they make do with all the lost years by bringing it together. And I'm talking about this very sensitive issue. It's very important we note that family relationships, parenting styles, sibling strategies is very, very important in order to move our society upwards, in order to understand that it is good for our mental health to be balanced. And of course, Ms. Mariam Abdul, have you joined me on the program?
Yes, I have.
All right. Now, talking about it, before we went on that quick break, we spoke about schools and all of that. But, Mariam, it's not easy. Most parents go out, the hustle, the bustle with this economic hardship that is facing a lot of people. People just say to themselves, hey, I am paying the schools to do the needful. And when you tell me it's not it's you owe that bigger blame when it comes to the school. How do you balance that, Mariam? Really, let the truth be told.
Yeah, like I told you, every institution has its rules. I'm not saying that the school is absolved from all liability of the child. There was always what they call I've forgotten there's a legal term for it. There was always that, that kind of like you give authority to a child, to the school, loco parentis.
Okay.
There was always this concept of loco parentis. It's giving the teachers the authority to do what you, the parents, would do to your child. That was the principle. And so, of course, when they started beating children and doing all this kind of corporal punishment, loco parentis as a doctrine is shifted. So they now started giving it a different kind of analysis. So for me, like I mentioned before, school's responsibility to teach your child, discipline your child when the child is unruly, teach your child cleanliness, and teach your child, general things that a school should teach the child. So a school shouldn't teach your child things that you can do. What comes to mind now is when you greet, the way Nigeria has 250 different ethnic groups. So the way that the Nupawas greet, people from Nupe greet, the way that the Igbo people greet, the way that the Hausa people greet, the way Fulanis greet is different. The school can't teach you how all these different ways you teach your child, for instance, how to greet. That's the responsibility of parents. So if I now say the school is liable or responsible for my child not greeting in XYZ way, that makes me silly. And a whole list of things that can be said that the school isn't supposed to do. People have been talking about the incident in the British Lead Academy, where the girl beat her colleague, and everybody was pointing fingers, at the school.
Yes.
I pointed fingers at the school also because they failed. They have a fiduciary relationship with the child. They owe her a duty of care. Both children, actually, the slapper and the slapped, as they phrased it now. Both of them, the school owes them, a duty of care that they shouldn't have even gotten to that stage. So the school failed in its own duties. That I give the school. There are cameras, and then there are people watching. And if it was a strongly disciplined school, that shouldn't have happened. So that's the blame of the school. But then you now shift the blame again to the parents. Parents do their best. I'm a mother too, and I do my best. And children have their own behavior and how they respond to certain things on their own. But definitely, if you raise a child in a way that you explain, do not cut down trees, do not harm animals, do not squish insects on the ground, do not beat your siblings, do not do this and do not do that. Over the years, it's inculcated inside of that child not to do that. It's not the responsibility of the school to teach somebody that. It actually isn't. It's done at home because the child was taught until a certain age before going, to school. So I really don't like when parents sit back and say, but the school should have taught her not to beat now. So then what is your own duty as a parent? Where then does your own duty lie? Where does it reside?
Well said, Mariam. Now, Mariam, for individuals out there who do not have this proper relationship because of the bad parenting skill of their parents, what would you say to them? Because there are so many children out there who do not have this bond when it comes to relating to their parents, especially their dad. I've seen, especially in African homes, you see that a child is closer to the mother than the father. You see that a child is closer to the father than the mother. There's this bond that they have. It's tight-knit. What can you say about that?
Yes, what flows for that family is what should obtain. There are some men who nurture their children in a way that society has said a woman should nurture the child. There are some women who nurture their child in a way that society says that a man should nurture. So I don't really get into the ins and outs of such situations. When a child is properly looked after and cared for by either parent, I don't think it matters, which of the parents is doing what. For me, the key thing is that the child is loved, is clothed, is sent to school, is looked after, has a comfortable place. It doesn't have to be a mansion, has a very comfortable place to stay, is given medical care, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, that open dialogue is very essential for you to establish. The poorest person in the farm or wherever they find themselves can be the kindest person to, his or her children, and can have that open dialogue with the child. I don't look at it as something of prestige or an elitist thing. There's only the elite that talk to their children. I find it even in the scriptures, how you see our prophets and all people that we've learned about, how kind, they were to animals, and how kind they were to children who are not even theirs, and how they adopted children, and how they converse with children. It would pay us more if we learn even from our holy scriptures and understand parenting skills.
Very, very true. Well said, Mariam. Now, there's this, is it an adage that says, it's not one person that trains up a child, it's the whole village that trains up a child. Now, I have seen, there was an incident that happened in a school, and a child was being beaten by this bike. I don't know what happened, but so many people were just passing. They didn't care. They didn't show concern. But someone stood and said, this child goes to my daughter's school. Why are you doing this to this child? And the biker says, what's your business? I am the uncle. She said, no, it's my business, because this child is wearing my daughter's uniform. That means he's a student of that school. So it actually concerns me that you be beating this child like this. What did the child do? And he's running late for school. Now, that's the mentality that we have in Africa. We feel that sometimes we don't show concern when it comes to other people's children. But that adage goes a long way, Mariam. It shows that we should not ignore, even if it's not your child, even if it's not your child that is being involved, you should not, you shouldn't get yourself involved in it. Now, looking at it critically, do you think that adage has spoken enough volume when it comes to that relationship between individuals, parenting styles, family, and all of that brought together? Because most people will not allow you to touch their children, but most people will allow you spank their children if they do anything wrong. So how would you, is that relatable in any way at all?
Yeah, it's like I said, like the old things of the past, it's been overrun by a difference. In those days, for instance, you can't be caught, teenagers that like smoking on the side of the road, or people who enter different vehicles and go home, or start trekking, things that you're not allowed to do within where your parents or relatives can see you. Some baba or some mama on the edge of the road will caution you right there. So, if I pass this street, I'm going to see cousin so. If I pass that street, so you see them dodging because they know they'll be told off. But society, how it is now, and those ones can actually beat you, in those days. But now, I don't know, there's this kind of extra protectiveness that parents have for their children that you can't even tell them the bad thing their child has done for fear that the child will even tell you off. You have sisters or brothers living in a house, and you want to say, oh, this child is rough, this child doesn't do this one has done this, and you're scared because of the response that you will get. You know, so society has shifted from that community-based raising of children to some kind of protective, don't talk about my child in that way. No, my child is not incapable of doing that. So everybody's minding their own business. They don't want to be confronted, and they don't want anybody to hold them in their mind that they've mentioned, you know, some certain things about their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've suffered all the most for that. Because if we have that nurturing kind of society that used to be, folks on the street can correct you and you kneel down and you greet. And so nowadays you just see children pass elders or even if they're peers and they
Very
don't greet.
true.
Even to say good afternoon is a problem,
Mm-hmm.
for this generation. So something is really, really wrong somewhere. Is it from the home?
Yeah, I would say, but the truth is, you instill all of these things in a child from the home front. I completely agree with you. But if you, they're like looking at the greeting aspect, you see, most children would just pass with their phones in their hands, and they don't even have the courteous behavior to say good morning or good afternoon. They just walk past like they own the place. It's so wrong. So how do we balance our time growing up and this particular generation? How do we balance everything to curtail this, to bring this family relationship? Because remember, once we might not be from the same parents, but if I see you outside the shores of Nigeria, automatically you become my sister. So, and you just say, yeah, that's my brother. And you just wonder, but we're not from the same place. But because we're from the same place, so to continue to have that relationship, what do you think we've done wrong in this generation?
The onus lies on us as parents because, there's something they call TOT, training of trainers. Your parents have trained you, their parents trained them, their parents trained them. And so since they've trained us, we have to train our children. I think we're slipping in our duties and we're shifting our responsibilities to people that it doesn't concern. It doesn't concern people to teach your child how to greet, or the manner in which the child should greet, or the frequency in which the child should greet, or how the child should appear. These things fall squarely on parents, and you can't shift the responsibility to anybody else. I see them in fact, I stopped them in stores. I was getting something the other day in a shop, and this young girl, my daughter's classmate, actually, she reached in between me and the shelf and was picking something up. Not only didn't she greet me, she actually pushed through me and kept her little fingers into the gap of the, shelf, plucked up what she wanted, and it was on her way. And I pulled her by her little shirt. And I said, "Did you see me here?" "Oh, sorry, ma, I did." And so I was explaining to her, I said, "You have to greet your elders. A society where you do not, how will you care for your elder? If I fell down on it, she'll pass me in that case. So we don't have compassion. And a society that does not value their elderly is a doomed society as far as
Yes,
I'm
it is.
concerned. So there's a lot of work to do. And this blame should stop being shifted to schools or to Islamia or to wherever or Sunday school. It falls squarely between you and I as parents. And we need to keep it right there and address it.
So, Mariam, how can we create that balance? How can we create the balance, first of all, in our home front before it spreads to our extended family members, grandparents? How can we curb it as an individual, as a family first, as a family unit first, so that it can expand without being disrespectful, without any lapses? How do we do that? How do we create that balance?
Yes, but by simply addressing the situation, how it is squarely. You have to always, maybe pull ears and say, did you greet your father? Or did you greet your uncle? This guest is here. Kind of put it out there. And then dialogue. Constantly, until the child understands. Because it's not dialogue they use in school, up to tertiary institutions and up to professional courses. I don't think that we read minds or there's telepathy in schools.
Of course.
I think there's dialogue. They communicate through dialogue and you study. So I think parents should try their best and do things like that over and over and over and over and over again.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Mariam, for being a part of Insight today. You have spoken well. But before we leave, is there hope for parents who cannot balance it all when it comes to maintaining that family relationship, parenting styles, and of course, sibling dynamics. Is there hope, Mariam, for parents who are going through this and they need to bring that, they need to come together to just create that bond? Is this still possible? Especially when their kids are
Yes, it's
grown up.
possible. It's possible. I think that as a human being, when something is wrong, we sense that there's something wrong. If your mental state isn't attuned to doing certain things, you look for help. If your part of your body isn't working, I think we go to the hospital. So if you feel that I'm not capable of doing this, I need help. Let's not be afraid. You know, the mental state is something that we like to push to Westerner. It happens here in Nigeria and Africa. So once you see that you're not strong enough mentally, look for help. Open up and look for help. It doesn't hurt. There's hope.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mariam Abdul. Thank you for being a part of the program. And yes, Mrs. Mariam Abdul, she is a lawyer, a woman and children's rights advocate, and she specializes in conflict mitigation. And she joined me on the program Insight today. Thank you so much, Mariam. I am so grateful. And well done on the works and the impact you've been making in society. Thank you so much, Mariam.
Thank you for having me.
All right, with that, I have to wrap it up on the program Insight today. But let's not forget, it's very important that we understand that family relationships are the connection and bonds we have with our family members. And this includes relationships with parents, siblings, grandparents, and other relatives. Now, it's very important that we understand that family relationships are important because they provide love, support, and a sense of belonging. Thank you all so much for being a part of Insight today. Join me same time tomorrow when we talk about some very issues that are making rounds when it comes to societal and, of course, topical issues, family issues on the program Insight today. I am Jumai Manson. Thank you all so much for being there. Bye-bye.